All right, get ready to dive into a fascinating world today. We're exploring wholesale bong and specifically sourcing them from China. I love a good global marketplace deep dive, and the mix of articles and guides you've sent over has me super intrigued.
Yeah, it's a pretty captivating area to explore because we're not just talking about like mass-produced factory stuff. We're going to be looking at regions where they have these like age-old glass-blowing traditions. But then we're also going to be jumping over to high-tech vape factories, all within China.
Yeah, it is kind of a clash of cultures. I'm picturing these small villages with centuries of glass blowing expertise, and then boom, we're in Shenzhen, surrounded by e-cigs. But let's rewind a bit before we get into all the cool gadgets and the cool craftsmanship. We need to talk about the legalities first, because importing bongs, I imagine that can be a little bit tricky depending on where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like playing a game of international hopscotch. Each square has its own rules. Some regions might be totally fine with it. They view it as like decorative glassware. But other places, they've got all these regulations, labeling requirements. It can be a little overwhelming.
So let's say someone out there is thinking about importing some bongs. What is like the first thing they need to do to make sure they're playing by the rules?
Okay, first and foremost, HS codes. They're like a product's passport, right? It tells customs, hey, this is what's coming in. This is how it should be classified. Using the wrong code could lead to, well, delays, fines, even like your entire shipment could be confiscated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For instance, a basic glass bong might fall under a completely different HS code than a bong with like intricate percolators, or say a silicone bong.
So it's not as easy as just slapping a tobacco use early sticker on the box and calling it a day, huh?
Oh, I'm sure customs officials have seen it all, but transparency is key here, right? You need to be super meticulous with your product descriptions, labeling, make sure everything aligns perfectly with the regulations of, well, wherever you're importing to.
Got it. So we've got our HS code memorized, our paperwork is in order, and we're ready to start sourcing. Where do we even begin looking for these wholesale bongs in China?
Okay, so that's where the real adventure begins, right? And the first decision you need to make is what kind of bong are you after? Because different regions in China specialize in different materials, different techniques, all that.
It's like picking a culinary adventure. Are we going for hand-blown glass delicacies, or are we thinking like cutting-edge silicone creations?
I like that analogy. If it's high-quality glass bombs you're after, then you got to look at Cangzhou and Hebei province and Baoyin and Jiangsu province. They're known for their glass-blowing traditions. And we're not talking just basic pipes here. These artisans create bongs with like percolators, recyclers, really intricate stuff.
Yeah, I was reading that some of the techniques they use in these regions date back centuries. Is it true they sometimes even use colored glass that's like imported from the US or India to get specific hues in the final product?
Yeah, that's right. They're really particular about their craft. Sourcing top-notch materials to get that perfect look and functionality. And it's not just about sticking to tradition either. A lot of these factories have adopted modern technology, which means they can make bongs with crazy designs, innovative features, stuff you just won't find anywhere else.
So, okay, I have to ask, walk me through how one of these intricate glass bombs is actually made. From a simple glass tube to like a finished masterpiece, it sounds like a pretty cool blend of art and science.
Okay, picture this. A workshop, glow of furnaces, the hiss of torches. It all starts with picking the right glass tubes. Then these skilled artisans, they heat the glass to super high temperatures and use tools, often passed down through generations, to shape it, manipulate it.
Like a delicate dance with molten glass.
Exactly. But that's just the beginning, right? To make those intricate percolators, recyclers, that takes a series of very precise cuts, wells, manipulations, all done really fast with tons of dexterity. It's amazing to watch.
And after all that delicate work, wouldn't the slightest bump shatter the whole thing?
That's where the annealing process comes in, a crucial step that a lot of people don't even know about. After the bong is formed, it's carefully placed in a special oven and slowly cooled over several hours.
So it's like giving the glass a chance to relax, settle into its new form.
Right. And that controlled cooling relieves any stress that's built up in the glass, which makes it way more durable, less likely to crack or break.
I bet that step is super important to make sure the bongs can survive the whole trip from, China to wherever they're going. But let's move beyond glass for a second. What about those silicone bongs that we're seeing everywhere these days?
Oh yeah, silicone bongs. They're definitely having a moment, and for good reason. They're known for being durable, portable, and basically indestructible. Drop it, toss it in a bag, it'll bounce right back.
So what's driving that surge in popularity? Is it just that they're, so durable, or is there something more to it?
Well, it's a few things, I think. Silicone is super versatile, right? So manufacturers can get really creative with the shapes, the sizes, the colors. Plus, they're way easier to clean than glass, which is a big plus for a lot of people.
So for someone looking to source these trendy silicone bongs, where should they be looking in China?
Dongguan, it's like the silicone capital. They've got all these advanced rubber and silicone manufacturing facilities there. They've really perfected the art of making high quality, leak-proof silicone bongs.
It sounds like Dongguan's like a hotbed of silicone innovation, but what about all the other smoking accessories that, go along with bongs? Where can we find those?
Well, for sheer variety and volume, you can't beat Yiwu. Imagine, like a massive marketplace spread out across blocks filled with every kind of smoking accessory you can think of. Grinders, rolling trays, storage jars, you name it. It's the place to go if you're looking to build out a whole product line.
Wow, that sounds like sensory overload in the best way possible. Definitely adding Yiwu to my travel bucket list, but we got to talk about the big one, electronic vaporizers. Where do those fit into this whole China sourcing puzzle?
Okay, for vapes and e-cigs, Shenzhen is king. It's like Silicon Valley for vaping tech. Countless factories pumping out devices with advanced features like you wouldn't believe it. Temperature controls, sleep designs, batteries that last forever. It's wild.
It's amazing how China has become this global leader in both the traditional craftsmanship and this cutting edge tech. But with so many options out there, how do we even start choosing the right supplier? Navigating these B2B platforms like Alibaba, it's got to be overwhelming.
Yeah, it could be a bit of a digital jungle out there, and not everyone on those platforms plays by the rules, unfortunately.
So how do we separate the good from the bad? What are some red flags to look out for when you're checking out potential suppliers?
Well, first things first, communication is key. If a supplier takes forever to respond, is vague in their answers, or just seems hesitant to give you details, that's a huge red flag. Remember, you're looking for a partner here, not just someone to, do a quick transaction with.
Yeah, it's like dating. You want someone who's responsive, communicates well, and seems genuinely interested in building a relationship. What about those verification badges on Alibaba? Are those worth anything or are they just for show?
Those badges can be helpful, but don't rely on them entirely. Think of them as a starting point. Like Alibaba has done some basic vetting, but you still got to do your own homework.
Okay, so trust but verify. We can't just take those badges at face value. We got to do our own detective work.
Exactly. So once you've got some potential suppliers lined up, really dive into their profiles. How long have they been in business? What do they specialize in? Do they have experience shipping to your region? Things like that.
And I imagine their product catalog is important too, right? Do they have a good range of products in, our specific niche, or are they just kind of offering everything under the sun?
Yeah, the catalog can tell you a lot about their focus. If they're selling everything from kitchen gadgets to bongs, that might be a sign to move on. You want someone who really understands your niche, the products in the market.
And of course, we can't forget about customer reviews. Those can be make or break for a product, or in this case, a supplier.
Oh, customer reviews are your best friend. Don't just look at the star rating either. Really read what people are saying. Are there patterns in the feedback? Are people consistently praising their communication, the product quality, the shipping speed? Or are there lots of complaints about delays, inconsistencies, bad customer service?
It's like checking restaurant reviews before you try a new place. A couple of bad reviews, maybe not big deal. But if everyone's saying the food is terrible, then you probably want to skip it.
Exactly. You want to see a consistent track record of good experiences, especially since we're talking about overseas suppliers, potentially big orders. You want to be sure.
All right, so we've scrutinized their profiles, we've read all the reviews, and we've narrowed down our list to a few suppliers that seem like they could be a good fit. Now what? How do we actually, start talking to them?
Well, this is where you got to put on your communication hat. Write a clear, concise message. Introduce yourself, your business, outline what you're looking for, and ask specific questions that'll help you gauge if they're a good match. And don't be afraid to get a little personal, mention something you liked about their profile or a specific product that caught your eye.
So first impressions are important, just like in any business relationship. But how do we strike that balance between, being friendly and professional? We don't want to come across as too casual or desperate.
Right, it's a balancing act. You want to be approachable and enthusiastic, but keep it professional. Remember, you're representing your business, so no slang, no overly casual language, and always proofread your message before hitting send.
And I bet timing is important too, right? We don't want to be messaging them at 3 a.m. their time.
Good point. Definitely be mindful of time zones. China's several hours ahead of most Western countries, so sending messages during their business hours shows respect and, that you're a professional.
All right, now let's talk about the sample request. I mean, that's got to be a crucial step before committing to a large order, right?
Absolutely. Requesting samples is non-negotiable. It's the only way to really see the quality, the craftsmanship, get a feel for the product before you invest a bunch of money.
But is it like rude to ask for samples right away? Are there any etiquette rules we should know about?
It's totally normal in wholesale. Any legit supplier will be happy to provide samples, especially if they can tell you're a serious buyer.
What's a reasonable cost for samples? Do we need to be ready to pay a lot for these little sneak
It
peeks?
really depends. Some suppliers might offer free samples, especially for smaller items. Others might charge a small fee to cover, like production and shipping costs. Be prepared to pay something, especially if you're asking for bigger or more complex pieces.
Okay, so we've got our samples, we've inspected them thoroughly, and we're feeling good about the quality, but is it really enough to judge a supplier just based on a few samples? I feel like there's got to be more to it than that.
You're right, samples are a great starting point, but they only give you a limited game. That's where factory visits come in.
Now, I know what you're thinking, a factory visit. That sounds a bit extreme, especially when we're just starting out.
It might seem like a big step, but it could be a game changer. Seeing their operation firsthand lets you check out their facilities, meet the team, get a sense of their professionalism and commitment to quality, really get a feel for the place.
But let's be real, a trip to China isn't always possible, especially for smaller businesses or those just starting out. Is there any other way to, get a peek behind the curtain?
Thankfully, we got technology for that. Lots of suppliers now offer virtual factory tours. They can hop on a video call with you, walk you through their facilities, introduce you to key people, answer any questions you have. It's not the same as being there, but it gives you a much better idea than just looking at a website.
Okay, so we've done our research, we've checked out the suppliers, requested samples, maybe even taken a virtual tour. We're feeling confident about this partnership. What's next? How do we actually place an order and, get those bongs shipped to us?
So now it's time to make it official. We've got to finalize all the details, figure out the logistics, and make sure everything's crystal clear to avoid any surprises down the line.
Sounds like we're about to dive into the world of contracts, invoices, and shipping schedules. The less glamorous but equally important side of things.
You got it. And that's exactly where we'll pick up next time. We'll break down how to finalize your order, navigate the ins and outs of international shipping, and make sure your precious cargo arrives safe and sound.
Welcome back to our deep dive into sourcing wholesale bongs from China. Last time we talked about the legal stuff, the key regions, and, how to find trustworthy suppliers. Now let's talk about those massive B2B platforms. I'm picturing like a digital maze filled with hidden treasures and maybe a few traps too.
That's not a bad way to think about it. Alibaba, for example, it's huge, right? Millions of products, thousands of suppliers. It can be pretty overwhelming.
So where do we even begin? What's the best approach to this digital treasure hunt?
First rule of Alibaba, don't just browse aimlessly. It's easy to get sucked into those endless product pages. You need a plan, a clear goal. So what kind of bong are you looking for exactly? What material, features, what's your budget?
It's like grocery shopping, right? If you go in without a list, you end up with a cart full of junk food and no milk.
Exactly. Once you know what you want, then you can use Alibaba's filters to narrow things down and get specific with your search terms. Instead of just glass bongs, try something like hand-blown glass bongs with percolators.
Okay, that makes sense. But even after we narrow it down, we're probably still going to have a ton of potential suppliers. How do we know who's legit?
This is where those verification badges we talked about earlier can come in handy. Remember the gold supplier, assessed supplier, things like that. It means Alibaba has done some basic vetting. But it's just a starting point.
Right, so trust but verify. We can't just assume they're good because they have a badge.
Right. So once you've got a few that look promising, really dig into their profiles. How long have they been around? What's their specialty? Do they have experience shipping to, your part of the world? All those details matter.
What about their product catalog? Do they have a good selection in our, specific niche, or are they kind of all over the place?
Yeah, their catalog can tell you a lot. If they're selling everything from like toothbrushes to bongs, that might be a sign to keep looking. You want someone who's focused, who really understands your niche.
And of course, we have to talk about customer reviews. Those can be so helpful, or, the opposite.
Customer reviews are gold. Don't just look at the overall rating either. Read the actual comments. What are people saying? Is everyone praising their communication, the quality of the products, the shipping speed, or are they complaining about delays, problems with the products, bad customer service? Those are red flags.
It's like those online reviews for, restaurants or hotels. If everyone's saying the place is dirty, you're probably not going to book it.
Right. You want to see consistency, positive experiences, especially since we're talking about overseas suppliers. big orders. You got to be careful.
All right, so we've done all our research, we've read the reviews, and we've got a short list of supplier that look good. What's the next step? Do we just, like, send them an email?
Basically, yeah, but you got to put some thought into it. Write a clear, professional message. Introduce yourself and your business, tell them what you're looking for, and ask some questions. Get a conversation going. And it's always good to be a little bit personal, like mention something specific you liked about their company or their products.
So we're trying to make a good first impression, like in any business relationship. But how do we do that without being, too casual?
Yeah, you don't want to be too casual. You're representing your business, so keep it professional. No slang, no emojis. Proofread everything carefully. And remember those time zones. You don't want to be sending messages in the middle of their night.
Good point. Okay, so what about samples? Do we just ask for those right away?
Absolutely. Samples are crucial. It's the only way to know for sure what you're getting before you commit to a big order.
Is it considered rude to ask for samples right off the bat, though?
Not at all. Any good supplier will be happy to send samples, especially if they think you're a serious buyer.
What about the cost? Do we need to pay for them?
It depends. Sometimes they'll be free, especially if it's a small item, but often they'll charge a small fee to cover their cost. Be prepared to pay a little, especially if it's a larger or more complicated item.
Okay, so let's say we get the samples, we check them out, and everything looks good. Are we done? Or is there more to it than that?
Well, samples are a great start, but they only tell you so much. You know what could be really helpful? A factory visit.
A factory visit to China. That seems a bit much, doesn't it?
I know it sounds like a big step, but it can be really worth it. You get to see the operation firsthand, meet the people, check out the facilities. It gives you a much better sense of who you're dealing with.
But let's be real, a trip to China isn't always realistic. Is there like a virtual option?
Actually, yeah, a lot of suppliers now offer virtual factory tours. They can do a video call, walk you through their facilities, introduce you to the team, answer your questions. It's not as good as being there in person, but it's definitely better than nothing.
So we've done our due diligence, requested samples, maybe even taken a virtual tour. We're feeling good about this supplier. Now what? How do we actually place an order and get those bongs shipped to us?
That's where things get real. It's time to finalize all the details, figure out the logistics, and make sure everyone's on the same page. No surprises.
So contracts, invoices, shipping schedules, the nitty-gritty stuff.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. We'll break it all down step by step so you can get those bongs from China to your doorstep without any hiccups.
And we're back, ready for the final part of our deep dive into wholesale bongs from China. We've talked about all sorts of things, the legal aspects, vetting suppliers, requesting samples, even virtual factory tours. Now it's time to get down to business, actually getting those bongs shipped and, into our hands.
Exactly. It's all about execution now. And like any good importer knows, it's all in the details.
Speaking of details, let's talk about contracts. Not the most exciting topic, I know, but probably pretty important, right?
Oh, absolutely essential. A solid contract protects both you and the supplier. It lays out all the important stuff like the product specs, pricing, payment terms, delivery timelines, quality guarantees, all of it.
So yeah, get it in writing, make sure everything's crystal clear, no room for like misunderstandings or surprises later on. What about intellectual property? That seems like something we should be careful about, especially where, getting custom designs made.
Yeah, great point. If you're investing in custom designs, you got to protect your IP, right? Make sure the contract states clearly that the supplier can't use your design for anyone else or sell them under their own brand.
Right. We don't want our awesome designs showing up on some like knockoff website. So, okay, we've got our ironclad contract, everything's signed and sealed. What's next?
Logistics. We got to figure out how to get those bongs from a factory in China to, well, wherever they're going. It's a whole process.
And I imagine shipping fragile glass across the ocean takes some serious planning. I'm already picturing broken bongs everywhere.
It doesn't have to be a disaster. The key is to, choose the right shipping method. For large orders, sea freight is usually the cheapest, especially for bulky items, but it's also the slowest.
So if we need those bongs fast, air freight's the way to go. But that's probably going to cost a lot more.
Exactly. Air freight's quicker but pricier, especially for heavier shipments. You got to weigh the costs and benefits, right? See what works best for your budget and how quickly you need the products.
All right, so let's say we've picked our shipping method. What about packaging? How do we make sure those bongs arrive in one piece?
Remember that pallet rule we talked about? Shipping on pallets is super important to minimize breakage. It keeps the boxes tightly packed, stacked securely, so they're less likely to get bumped around.
So it's not just about protecting the bongs, it's about, efficiency, too.
Yeah, making the most of the space in those shipping containers. And speaking of protection, don't forget insurance. Accidents happen, right?
True. Better safe than sorry. What about customs? I feel like that's a whole other challenge.
Customs can be tricky. Lots of paperwork, regulations, potential for delay. It's important to work with a supplier who knows the ropes, can handle all the documentation and stuff.
So they got to have our back when it comes to all that bureaucratic stuff. What kind of documents are we talking about exactly?
You'll need a commercial invoice, packing list, maybe a certificate of origin, depends on where you're shipping to. These documents tell customs what's in the shipment, the value, where it came from, all that, so they can figure out if there are any duties or taxes.
Lots of paperwork, but I guess it's necessary, right? And I bet communication is key throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. Stay in close contact with your supplier, from confirming the order details to tracking the shipment, making sure everything goes smoothly.
What a long distance relationship. Got to stay connected. Okay, so the bombs are on their way. What should we be doing while we wait?
Get ready to receive that shipment. Make sure you've got the space, the manpower, all that. Notify your warehouse team, double check your inventory system, and hey, maybe even plan a little unboxing party.
Now you're talking. I love it. But before we celebrate, let's rewind for a second. We talked about negotiation before, and it seems like there are lots of opportunities to negotiate, not just the price.
You got it. Negotiation's an ongoing process, right? You can negotiate minimum order quantities, payment terms, lead times, even after-sales support. It all depends on your needs and what's important to your business.
So it's about being strategic and thinking long term. It's not just about getting the cheapest price. It's about getting the best deal overall.
Exactly. You want a win-win situation, right? A good supplier will work with you to find solutions that benefit both sides. It's about building a partnership, not just, a one-time transaction.
Well, this has been an amazing journey. We've learned so much about wholesale bongs, from the legal stuff to the art of negotiation, the shipping logistics, everything. I feel like I could teach a class on this now.
You definitely could. And remember, sourcing from China might seem intimidating at first, but with careful planning, research, and a willingness to, learn and adapt, it can be a really rewarding experience, not to mention profitable.
So to everyone listening out there who's thinking about importing bongs or any product from China, really, the key is to be prepared, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Happy sourcing, everyone.